The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Well, thank you guys for coming today. Today, of course, is our second annual Teaching History Today Content and Strategies for World and U.S. History. We are really excited to be able to make this an annual event. We did this last year with great success, and we're excited to be able to partner with the MTSU Department of History, the MTSU Center for Educational Media, and then this year we are also bringing on the Albert Gore Research Center as another one of our partners for this year's event. And so that we can think about, again, the content that you guys need that will help you as you teach your curriculum, but then also we can think about strategies and ways that you can take all of the wonderful resources and primary source material that's out there and really get your students engaged with it. And so that is really our purpose in today's event, is to think about, again, the content that's out there and then the strategies and ways that we use it, and kind of how can we bring this all together as we teach both our U.S. history curriculum and our world history curriculum. So our partners with the Center for Educational Media will be recording today's sessions. So you may notice that we have a cameraman back here in the back, and that you guys have microphones at your tables. And so that'll be, again, we're going to be able to record today's session and share that later on down the road as content that your fellow teachers who didn't make today can watch, or other people can watch for PD credit. And in fact, last year's sessions, if after today you really enjoy today and you want to get even more content, last year's sessions are currently available through the MTSU Center for Educational Media website, and I'll be sending you guys a link to that in a couple weeks with all of those sessions. So, if you don't know me, my name is Kira Duke, and I am the Education Specialist with our Teaching with Primary Sources program here at MTSU. The Teaching with Primary Sources program is funded through the Library of Congress and is administered out of the Center for Historic Preservation here on campus. And the center has been a part of the MTSU campus for over 30 years now, and does a variety of different things, including the Tennessee Civil War National Heritage Area. We work on a partnership project with the National Park Service with the Trail of Tears. We also work with Tennessee Century Farms and work with communities really around the Southeast to help to develop and preserve and tell their stories. We have been very fortunate to have the Teaching with Primary Sources program now for over 10 years. And so the Teaching with Primary Sources program offers professional development. We also offer educational materials and resources through our website. So again, like I said, we'll be emailing you guys content and strategies from today's session, so you'll be able to access all of those things through our website. If you are not currently on our email list, you will get added, and so that's why it's important that you fill out your contact sheets. We will also be using those to fill out your certificates for attendance today, which you guys will pick up at the end of the day, which is a little different than how we normally do it, but we've got quite a few things scheduled this week, and so to make sure that you get them in a timely fashion, we will actually have them printed and ready for distribution at the end of the day. On your agendas, you will note that there are sessions. Come on in. Hi. So this is our Geographic Awareness session. So you will note that there are two sessions going on at all times during the day. You are free to pick and choose which of the sessions you would like to attend. We have designed them so, again, we're trying to make sure we're hitting both U.S. and world history. If you have questions about the content of any of those sessions and how they might fit best with your curriculum, please let me know, and I'll be happy to kind of answer some questions and direct you to which session will be best for you. We will be taking breaks intermittently throughout the day. When you get ready to do that, there are restrooms that are located back out this way and around the hallway here. There are snack machines and drink machines that are down in the first floor lobby area. We can help to get you to the correct lobby because there's kind of two main lobby areas of this building. And then we will be breaking for lunch after the second session and giving you guys meal vouchers for today. So you'll be able to use those at the Macaulay Dining Hall, which is directly in the building directly behind the Learning Resource Center here, and we'll distribute those at the end of the session. You can also use them at the Student Union. There are more limited selections over there, and you know, sometimes the time to get through the line over there takes a little longer, and you have an hour and 15 minutes. But you will be free to pick and choose which places that you go for lunch. Your meal ticket will get you in either one. All right, questions? All right, no questions. Well, let's get started. So today, again, we're thinking about, to start off the day, using historic maps to develop geographic awareness. So how many of you guys have looked at the new curriculum standards? Yeah. Several of you? Okay. Hello, come on in. So we are just getting started with our geographic awareness session. Oh, one other thing. If you have drinks or cups, if there is something in them, please make sure they are in your bag. You cannot have them out in this room or in the room out here. We want to make sure that we are respectful of the rules of the facility here, so just make sure you've got those put away. All right. So those new curriculum standards, have you guys noticed the social studies practice standards that are in those? So if you look at those, there are 6 different social studies practices that are incorporated within those new curriculum standards. And standard 6 of the social studies practice is developing geographic awareness. And so that at all grade levels, students are responsible for kind of different levels of thinking about how they incorporate geographic learning and what they understand about maps and just the world around them into their learning. So, you know, for elementary, for the K2, you know, we're starting simple with just kind of identifying symbols on the maps and understanding relationships between people, places, and resources. When we get to grades 3 to 5, we are starting to think about, you know, how the relationships between people and resources are based on geographic location. We're thinking about determining the use of different types of maps and their purpose. We're going to think about analyzing spatial relationships and interactions. And then we're going to examine how geographic regions and perceptions change over time. By middle school, we are kind of adding to that and thinking about using geographic perspective to how it determines relationships. We are thinking about, again, the use of different types of maps and thinking about their structure, context, and validity. We're analyzing location and conditions and connections. We're still thinking about interactions, and then we're examining how geographic regions are fluid across time and space. And then at the high school level, again, we're adding even more into that so that we are making sure that they understand about scale, that they are thinking about location, conditions, and connections of places, and like again, spatial associations, and how all of these things work together. And then we're going to examine how geographers use region and perceptions of regions and how that's fluid across time and space. And again, thinking about the interactions between humans and the physical environment. So you can see that really at all grade levels, students have to be building their geographic knowledge. And so there's a lot of possibilities for ways that you can work in historic maps to help to meet the social studies practice skills at your grade level. So what we're going to start with is just looking at one of my favorite maps. It's the Waltzey-Mueller 1507 World Map. And what we're going to do with this one is we're going to think about first just analyzing that map. So what are some things that we would want students to pick up on when looking at this one? So we're going to think about you know, basic analysis, which if we're thinking about the model the Library of Congress uses is what do we see, what do we know, and what do we wonder? So they use a 3-question approach. What do we see, what do we know, and what do we wonder? And then we're going to think about locating identifiable land masses. We're going to think about locating the standard map features, so thinking about the example of the equator, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and longitude lines. And then we're going to think about the historical significance and the legacy of this particular map. Now, what we're going to do, and if we will clear off kind of 4 tables. So whichever table your group is kind of designated at, if you will kind of clear off that table because you're going to need it. We actually have this map printed out in different pieces. So the first thing that your group is going to do once you get together is you're going to take this map and try to figure out how to put it together so that it's all in one piece. So we're going to start with a puzzle, and we're going to piece it together, and then we're going to analyze it.
This is north.
Maybe.
So again, we're thinking about, first off, analyzing. So I want you guys to look at it thinking about those three questions. What do we see? What do we know? And what do we wonder? What do we see? What do we know? And what do we wonder? So what are some things that you guys see when we're analyzing the map? All right, we see Africa, right? So we see Africa. Well, what else do we see?
We see a highly detailed area of Europe and Mesopotamia.
All right, so we see lots of detail over here in this region. So Europe, kind of Mesopotamia, the Middle East. So there's not a lot of America, right? So what we don't see is the American continents as we are used to seeing them on a map. Okay.
Well, it's only 10 years discovered by the Europeans, so they haven't really covered all of it.
Okay. So jumping ahead to our next question, what do we know? We know 1507. We're still in the age of exploration. There's a lot of things they don't know.
They haven't really gone over to Asia and done a lot in Asia as well.
Yeah, which is one reason that maybe Asia looks, yes. What are some other things that you guys noticed?
But there are some, they kind of know some of the things like with Asia and Africa because of the trading and the trade routes and stuff. So they're kind of familiar with some of it.
Okay.
I mean, they may not know exactly, but they have a better idea of what's there as opposed to the Americas because they hadn't started trading yet.
So and this is the wonderful thing about being able to use these maps online is you can zoom in to get great detail. So we can see here where we know some of the, the trade routes are that, they do have, towns, they know some of the rivers, they know some about that region.
Yeah. They have lines of latitude and longitude, so the mathematics for navigation are being applied.
Okay, so we do see, latitude and longitude lines.
And they're curved, so the concept of the Earth being round is starting to take hold versus it being flat.
We have an extraordinary level of detail for Europe. I don't know if that was mentioned already, but it's almost down to the block, the city block.
I noticed that Africa was really large on the map, and this was about the time that it was being colonized, so they probably had a better, fuller idea of what Africa was, how much was there.
They had already gone around it, I believe, by this time too. So, okay.
Yeah, so we think about kind of the the early age of exploration. One of the first places they're exploring, of course, is the the coastlines of Africa as they make their way around. And we do notice here, when we're looking at it, that basically the entirety of the coastline, they've got things marked, right?
Well, that's how they followed it.
Yeah.
That they followed. They were getting further away than they had to get in line of sight, so that because they thought they'd fall off.
Mm-hmm. But when we compare that coastline to what they have noted here for the interior, right? So what do we know about the interior based on what they have represented? Right? So we see elephants. We see a group of native peoples. Some mountains, and maybe we think there's some lakes up there, right? All right, what else?
Just how decorative it is around the edges. Just all the pictures. It kind of lets me know that they're, how much time was put into this.
Yes. Yeah, so it is highly decorative around the edges. So we think about, I'm sorry.
Just artistic, really.
Yes.
It's a depiction of heaven. That's heaven because they don't really understand the concept of space and outside the world. So it's heaven. It's heavenly.
Okay.
I noticed Amerigo Vespucci was there.
Yeah. So we see Amerigo Vespucci.
It's interesting, the two sides of the world. So they see in the upper part there's two sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got hemispheres, right?
incomplete, of course, but still.
I had a cartographer tell me one time that a map is more of an infographic than anything. And I was like, that's a pretty interesting idea.
There's still a lot shorter distance between Europe going west to Asia than we know to be there today. So they still don't have any idea how big the world is. They still think it's smaller.
Right. So so the spatial relationships between the continents is definitely not correct.
And Europe is in the center.
Yes. Yeah, so when we think about, and that's something really interesting to get students to think about when we look at maps, is what is at the center and why is that important? What does that tell us?
I think it's interesting. I always use different, because we think about the pull-down map that we have in our classroom. We can all describe it without seeing it, but if you give a student, say, a map that has Australia in the center, which is kind of map that a student in Australia would use, it's actually, ours always splits the Pacific Ocean. Their map splits the Atlantic Ocean, throws them for a loop. And so using maps with different perspectives, I think students memorize, but they can't truly synthesize and identify.
Yes, that's a great point. Because it does, you're right, we can all probably think back to what the maps looked like when we were in grade school and what, that our teachers had that hung down all the time. And that if you put a map that looked differently, like that would, to think about it a little more, right? Think about where countries are and where geographic features are at. So what else do we notice?
You really know Australia.
All right, yeah. Yeah, where's Australia over here? We're also missing a continent. Yeah, Antarctica's not there. Unless that's no, that says Madagascar. So.
The artist, the cartographer is also an artist. Okay. That if you zoom out, please, you'll notice they probably started with that frame first. Maybe had apprentices in the workshop starting on the border designs, but when they actually started applying the map, they realized that Africa didn't fit, and so they had to adjust the bottom of the frame to match with that. And that's a great touch point for the kids who are really visual learners and are getting into art projects, that make sure you know what you want to do before you start making it, because when you have to get in and change things, you can have some.
So you have to stick another piece of paper here at the bottom to finish drawing. Yeah. Yes.
I also kind of see this whole effort to try to put a globe onto a flat surface. They're really trying to, how do I conceptualize that? How do I put that on?
Yeah. How do we take something that's round and make it flat and two-dimensional, right? All right. Anything else that you guys noticed? So we talked about some of the things that we know. What things do you wonder? What questions do you have for this map?
How many other maps they used as source material?
Okay. Yeah. How many maps do they use for source material? What other sources do they use besides just maps? Other questions?
Well, using such a map that's not accurate, it's like when you get out in the ocean, how do you get back? Just how do you not get lost? Because the map is whopper-jawed anyway, and it's like, if you're a sailor out there, how do you track back to where you started from?
Yes, when you think about, those early explorers essentially, going places that they didn't have, if they had maps, they, maybe weren't correct, or maybe they had very little information at all. How do you navigate in a world that you don't understand? Yeah. And then how did they collect information to try to create maps so that the next people would have a better sense of how to get to where they were going?
Well, they used data. They used what happened back then is data, and then they used stories. So it's a mixture of the two. So it's.
And it may be worthwhile to point out, this is not a navigational map.
Yeah.
Sailors use charts to navigate. This is meant to be in a book or put up on a wall.
Yeah.
Decorative. Yeah. This is an indulgent, wealthy person's purchase.
So there's something really significant about this map that makes this one of the library's kind of prized possessions. So if you look at the map and you really pay attention to the South American continent there, what we know to be South America, you will see the word America. This map is the first time that word appears. And so that is the first time that we see the continents that we now know to be North and South America actually labeled as America within the European world. So again, it's the thing that makes this map truly significant and something you could point out to your students. Now, something, again, for your students that may be visual learners. And I know for me, the thing that I find most interesting about this map is, again, trying to understand what was the mindset and what was the understanding of the world for people, in the late 15th, early 16th century. If you think about Columbus and Columbus, sailing to, try to find the Asia trade route and coming this direction, it always just can boggle my mind. Like, really, why did he think he could do that? Like, why did he think that he could, travel west to get to China more quickly than he could go in the other direction? Well, when we look at this map and we see what they thought the world looked like, all of a sudden that makes a lot more sense. And the first time that I saw this and I really started thinking about it, and I was like, oh, well, all of a sudden, like, again, this helps me to understand in a way that even knowing the story of Columbus and reading things about Columbus that I had never really quite grasped in the same way. So I think, again, we think about how we can help our students to kind of understand that time period and the thought process for that time period. This can help to give them that visual reference to help understand exploration in a different way. So thoughts about using maps in this way where they're kind of a puzzle and students are putting them together to analyze. How do you think your students would be able to do with putting together one of these maps? Challenging? Yeah?
I think they do very well. I teach ninth graders, but I think any group would because, first of all, there's no wrong answer.
Okay.
Anything they point out is a right answer. And for those students who don't really get it through reading because they have some kind of a lower level reading level, they're going to be able to see this and they're going to be able to point something out and nobody can really make fun of them because, well, yeah, it's true. And as a teacher, you can identify that. That boosts their self-esteem for one, and so that will get them more engaged and actually, what's the word I'm looking for? It will, it's a buy-in to it. And so in the future, they're more likely to get into it again. Oh, I was successful at this last time, I can be successful at this again.
Right, you can build their confidence, right?
And so, and putting it together, first time is always going to be a first time, but after that, it's cakewalk.
Well, something to think about in using the maps in this way so that you can have them kind of, they're printed in multiple pieces and you're trying to kind of piece them together as a puzzle. Having students look at just one piece of the map. They're going to have to really kind of dig into that piece and note more about it than if they're looking at the whole, right? Giving them a smaller piece to digest is going to help them to make sense of that and maybe to dig more deeply into the analysis than if they're just looking at it as all 16 pieces together or 12 pieces together. So you might think about it in that way, and so that if you had groups of students together that you were giving each student one piece that they're working with and then working in groups, then you could then have the students put the whole thing together and talk to each other about the things that they had discovered when looking at their one single piece. Again, as a way to kind of help them to dig more deeply into these, especially when we get maps that have lots of detail. And so that can really help to pull apart some of the contents that's there and some of the layers to these maps. As I mentioned, the Waldseemüller map is one of the Library of Congress's kind of prized possessions. And because it is, they have a wide array of materials, supporting materials that you can use to kind of teach using that map. And so there's a lot of good secondary source material. Thank you. There is also a really good lesson plan that they have together for the Waldseemüller map. And they also have it formatted so that you can print it out in the 12 sheets. So that's something that's already formatted. You just hit print and it comes out. And I'll send you guys a link to this. And you guys will actually get a link to the PowerPoint here so that you'll be able to access all of that. So after doing basic analysis, and we talked a little bit about this in that one, let's think about purpose. So understanding the purpose of a map. So what are some different uses for maps? What are some different ways that maps are used?
To identify geographical, like mountains or lakes or rivers.
Okay.
So topographical.
Political boundaries.
Political boundaries, topographical, geographic features. Scale.
Road maps, travel.
All right, travel, so road maps, navigation. Records, okay. All right, situation map. Elevation. Climate. All right, narrative, yeah. So having students work with historic maps, and one of the great things you can do is think about purpose. Because we can find all these wonderful historic maps that were used for a wide variety of reasons, and having them analyze those maps to determine what the purpose of the map was. So when we do that, what clues are we looking for to determine purpose? And we'll open this one up here so you guys can see it just a little bit better. And we're going to use this one as our example. What clues would you want students to point out here to try to figure out the purpose of this map? All right, so start at the top, right? So title. What else? All right, so captions. All right, landmarks. So, and what is the major landmark that we see depicted here? All right, the Tennessee River, right? Yes, color coding. And one of the things that I find that I really like about this map is the contrast in the colors. And I think it's a great historic map, but it's also just kind of a pretty map. All right, what else?
The key, if it has one.
All right, is there a key? And so we can see there's a little bit of one right here. So at least we see, rebels are red, the Union is blue.
You can kind of make your own. You can determine. It's good, like knowing that the church, it says Shiloh Church in the corner, and so you can see that symbol now as a church. So if you see that symbol somewhere else, it might be a church.
All right, so we see the symbol here, yeah, and then we see that it's also labeled, so we can figure, okay, that symbol is denoting a church.
Yeah. Recognizing there are conventions for map making, that you will identify the similar things with the same thing on different maps, so that you can carry one symbol or.
Got a lot of notes also that a lot of maps don't always have as much. Handwritten, here's what's happening here kind of stuff. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one we see a lot of explanation written in, which would be interesting to compare it to some other, maybe maps from the Civil War to see, how they use, like I said, symbols in quite the same way. And, is it similar? So how would you describe the purpose of this map?
I think since it's got so much information on it, it feels almost like an after battle sort of, here's what went down, sort of a record of everything that happened and where everybody was stationed and how many there were, and the arrows kind of show how everything happened, where the driving force was and stuff like that. So I think it probably was an after the battle kind of thing.
That makes complete sense because it has all the casualty figures there.
Yeah, so we see the casualty marks here, figures. It shows where troop movements were at, because we see these arrows are drawn where they're advancing. We also notice says here there's 3 miles from Harding. I think that's Harding is what that landing. Okay.
And again, in the middle of a battle, you're not going to take time to really worry so much about stuff like that. But afterwards, that might have been a key.
Right. So yeah, this map is telling us essentially the story of what happened at the Battle of Shiloh. And we even get a couple of particular dates here, April 6th and 7th, 1862. So it's telling us kind of what happened on those 2 dates of the battle. So that's one example.
Makes you wonder whether it was, most of the maps we have are Union maps because that would look like it could have been a Confederate map. Only because how would the Union forces know how many rebels were missing? They wouldn't know that.
Well, looking at the, well, no, since it's a summary, we don't know if that summary was written by them or somebody later on. Well, it's from the Virginia Historical Society, so that, I mean, could possibly Confederate.
What's the name of the battle?
It says both Pittsburgh Landing or Shiloh, so you can't use that because usually if you see Pittsburgh Landing, it means it's Union. If you see Shiloh, it's Confederate. But having both kind of negates that, which is an interesting about Civil War that you can bring up to students when you think about how they named things. Of course, if they were using a landmark, usually that meant it was a Union victory because the Union didn't know the small towns. If it was a Confederate victory, they tended to name it after the local small town because they would have had locals who knew the names of the areas, which is interesting. All right, so switching gears a little bit. So let's look at this map and think about the purpose of this one. So thoughts to begin with. What are some things that you guys notice here that might help us to determine purpose? It says at the very bottom, 1887.
This map to me looks like when you go in Google and you tilt the perspective, 45-degree angle, kind of deal. It's not a typical flat map, so maybe it's trying to show elevation or the sense that there's something there.
All right, so we think about the thing that's probably going to be most similar to this from a student's perspective are kind of street view maps that we get now, right? That we can see on Google. All right, so it shows growth. What do you see there that makes you say
Well,
that?
just how far back it goes. And then, of course, 1887, that would have been after the yellow fever epidemics when 3/4 of the city left and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we see, one of the things that we note here is it's showing essentially all this open land here, all this room for growth and development, right? With a focus here at the front of the river and, of course, all of the trading opportunities here along the river, right? The commerce opportunities.
Oh, those smokestacks are along the river there.
Yeah, they are riverboats. Well, not all of them. Yeah, you're right. There's a few factories, yeah. But a line of riverboats there. What else do we notice?
You can kind of see the division between the different sections of society, kind of, because you start to look out to the left, they're probably not as developed, smaller buildings,
So we think probably maybe this is more residential, perhaps. Okay. What else do we notice?
They haven't bridged the Mississippi yet.
Right, there's no bridge. New one or old one.
I noticed there's a lot of major landmarks pulled out and drawn kind of around it, so it makes me wonder if this was sort of like a travel brochure of the day, hey, come check out our cool city, here's what we've got going on.
Right, so let's take a minute to look at some of the things that they've noted here. So we see the Livermore Foundry and Machine Company, the Chickasaw Cooperage Company, the Zellner and Company Boots and Shoes, the William R. Moore and Company, Wholesale Dry Goods, the Gayoso Hotel.
Could this map have been used to try to have potentially brought in other businesses?
Okay, it's a good question. Ironworks, Gin Company, the Mill. We see a perspective map of the Chickasaw Land Company. We're going to come back to that. Transportation facilities, Christian Brothers College, the Coal Manufacturing Company, Stocks, Bonds, and Real Estate, the Jet Palace, the Lumber Company, and a manufacturing company.
I also wonder if those organizations had to buy some advertising space.
Did those people, did they pay to advertise? The other thing that you'll note here at the bottom is it lists key buildings, right? So we have the post office, the courthouse, the city hall, public schools, the fire engine houses, the waterworks, the medical college, churches, some of the buildings and the businesses that were featured around the edges of the map are noted there. But the big thing you would eventually want your students to focus in on, of course, is right here, when we see essentially who put this together? The Chickasaw Land Company. And we see essentially their advertisement here in the corner.
Free sites for factories.
Next to the 1 mile racetrack and Park Avenue and the boathouse. I'm guessing this is probably where there's a park that's here now. The depot, music stand, a hotel. So yeah, so we have all these wonderful attractions out here next to the land that the Chickasaw Land Company has available.
The very last sentence on that advertisement, free sites for factories with unlimited water. Free water.
Yeah, because they've got water, rail, road. I mean, they're connected.
So purpose. Settlement, right? We're trying to sell people land, right? Why you should come to Memphis in 1887?
We just had a really bad epidemic, but we're good now.
I mean, I don't think they have their city charter back just yet at this point, or maybe they've just gotten it back. But yeah, so we have our city's depopulated. We need a tax base because we can't afford to maintain the city that we had. We have all this wonderful land. Come join us, right? And we have recently discovered that we have a wealth of wonderful fresh water. So we think about this one in these perspective maps. Usually it is, land companies trying to, again, tout development and business opportunities. And there's a great collection of these perspective maps for Tennessee cities. So they have Knoxville, Chattanooga, Memphis, Jackson, I think Clarksville. There is not a Nashville one, although there is one for Nashville for the Centennial Exposition. But they didn't do one of actually the city of Nashville for some reason. That's available through the Library of Congress. So thoughts about this type of map?
I think this is good for kids because a lot of our kids have been to some of these cities. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do for these kids is to teach them then versus now. Because that's the coolest thing about history is to be somewhere and wonder what it was like back in 1887. Well, here's what it looked like.
Yes, and thinking about, again, that connecting them to what they're familiar with, right? And thinking about how we can use maps. So when we look at a map like this, or really any historic map, we can dig into these and, we can find street names. Well, we could look at Front Street today in Memphis and see what it looks like, right? We could look and see, is this park still here? How has this park changed? We could think about some of the buildings that are referenced here. Are those buildings still standing?
And you could say, that's analysis. You could say what caused them to change. I mean, that's a 10-ready writing prompt right there.
You guys mentioned the bridge. Where is the bridge at, right? How did the interstate system change the layout of our land and our transportation system, and how when we started to build bridges, so we could think about how those things cut through and how that changed our landscape.
I think it would be interesting to get this map and like one of those that I said that you get when you travel somewhere and it looks just almost like this, and put them side by side and just say, what do we notice that's similar, different? The advertisement's still there. It's all, even at that, the social aspect of it, the advertisement, people are still buying to get their information out there.
Yes. So what are some things here that we would want to note to help students to determine purpose?
Well, that profile up at the top is going to let you know why they put a canal there.
All right. So here at the top, we see profile, right? And what is the thing that we are really emphasizing in this profile? Elevation, right? Why is elevation important when we're thinking about Panama?
Rain to get the water in there.
Right. So we think about, of course, the construction of the Panama Canal and how elevation would have greatly impacted how that construction went about and the route, that, of course, that they chose for the placement of the canal. Anything else here that you guys would?
You can see the real detail, coastal detail and naming and stuff where the canal is there at Cologne, and because that's part of it. They're more detailed right in that region, obviously, than they are anywhere else.
Okay. Yeah, and we see essentially got this whole line of little communities, like right along where they're putting the canal.
I mean, obviously, they care about the rest of the map because there's detail and there's structure to it, but the real meat and potatoes is in around, you know.
Which is also right in the center, right?
It's also one of the thinnest points, which is also what that up there at the top. Not just deep depth, but also that it's small enough that they can kind of show it very well on this map. That this is the best place to go because it's the thinnest part of this, so we don't have to do as much digging there either.
Okay. Yeah, so this one, of course, is going to be kind of more, a little bit more what they're accustomed to seeing, right? It's more familiar as far as the type. All right, one more that we're going to look at. You guys are familiar with Sanborn maps? All right, just one of you? Okay.
These are like plans.
All right, so you said it looks like plans, right? All right. So they look like plans. Somebody else, what do you notice here when we look at this?
It doesn't show everything that's there. It shows specific buildings, specific things.
All right, so yeah, so we're kind of emphasis on buildings, right, and structure.
It looks a little bit like this.
Okay, yeah, so a little bit like our campus map. Anything else you guys want to note as we?
It's color-coded.
It's color-coded?
It might show like size of the building because I see some like 34.5.
All right, we see some markings. Okay.
And it's, I don't know why, but what's up with the concrete?
All right, so we noticed that the blue buildings are noted as concrete. All right, so the Sanborn maps are fire insurance maps. So that when you're looking at these, and what makes these great to use as far as a primary source is because when they went in and did these, in a lot of towns, they noted the businesses. So you can see, for example, here at the top, when we look at this, we see, this is Episcopal Church. Here's a well. This is probably some kind of grocery. So post office.
So is red like this is a fire hazard? Danger?
Yeah, it's probably depending on the material, yeah. And I don't know if the red is wood or brick, or maybe the yellow is wood. Red is brick, blue is stone, gray is iron, brown is fireproof, and green is special. Windows and shutters are noted. Windows in the first story.
They know about ventilation in case it catches on fire.
Yeah. So the purpose of this map then, of course, is going to tell us, the types of buildings and, essentially the fire danger. But then it also tells us purpose of buildings, right? And we can see lot lines. So we can tell a lot about a community looking at these types of maps. And of course, this is what will become Auburn University. So when you're thinking about, again, helping students to understand kind of small, communities and purposes of buildings, the Sanborn maps are really a great source to look at and kind of a different type of map for them to explore. And of course, you also have transportation maps, so you have like railroad maps that are out there that you can look at as another type of map. So what I want to spend the remainder of our time doing is thinking about change over time. So we think about analysis, we think about purpose, and all this leads us to begin thinking about then change over time. And so there's an activity that we're going to do that looks at how we can have students work with and analyze a group of maps and try to place them in sequential order to determine change over time. And so that as they look at the maps, essentially they can analyze those maps and talk about how regions change based on what they see represented within those maps. All right, and so we are going to do 5 groups this time. All right, so we're going to have you guys start out with is we're going to start out with 3 maps. So I'm going to pass, each group is going to get 1, and you're going to figure out, looking at each one, kind of, again, what order they go in. All right, so you've got your first 3. Again, looking at these 3, I want you guys to put the first 3 in order. Okay, let's talk about these three, and then we'll layer in another one here. So first off, which one do you guys think goes first?
The 13 colonies map.
All right, so 13 colonies. All right. So what made you think that one first? All right, so Tennessee's not on there.
It says it's made in London of the United States of America in accordance to a peace treaty. They're on the corner, so.
Okay, so the location that it was made.
The flag only has 13 dots.
Okay, a flag only has 13 dots, yes.
It's a big view. Instead of one of those closer, like more detailed views, it's a big broad area, so that kind of feels like it would be first.
Okay. What did you guys think went second? All right, Kentucky Territory. Why?
Because it states that Tennessee was formerly of North Carolina.
Okay.
It's also got landmarks instead of sort of like county divisions. This one's got a little bit of that going on here.
Okay.
This is more just rivers, mountains, forests.
All right, so it's noting more kind of the geographic features and not so much political boundaries, right? Okay. And so that puts the Tennessee map last. And why'd you guys put that one last?
It looks more like what it looks like today.
Okay.
There's cities that are actually labeled on it.
Okay.
And it's the state of Tennessee, not
That's true.
All right, so we have state instead of territory. They're actually towns noted. So we have, people have moved in. We've got essentially, communities that have organized. All right, so to complicate this, now that we've got those three in, we're going to add another one. So again, thinking about the three that you have, where does this one fit into the scheme of things?
This is a new
All right, so where do we think this one fits in? First? Why first?
A new map of North America from the latest discoveries.
All right, so the title.
I think it's just showing the British territories as a whole and not the colonies. The second one, the next one shows the actual colonies as they've been established.
Boundaries don't seem as well defined.
Okay. Yeah, boundaries aren't as defined. It does show kind of the broader, British colonial world in North America.
Less cities along the coastline also.
All right, less cities.
Canada's label is New France.
All right.
It has Earl Granville's property listed across.
Okay. Yeah, we see Earl Granville's property noted on there. All right, so anyway, we think about how that one fits in. Colonial before we were actually states. All right, and our last one.
This is 1794. No counties. Not that's gonna help me.
Okay, where do we think this one goes? In the middle? All right, why do we think this one goes in the middle? This one does have a date on it. I missed a date. What else?
It's not as, like this map had more clearly defined sort of just that specific area of Tennessee, and that was still calling it the Western Territory of, Southwestern Territory of North Carolina and Territory of Georgia. They weren't formally labeled like they should be.
Okay, so when we see the map that we had fourth now, has noted Tennessee as a actual kind of state territory area. The one that we're looking at right now for the third place one notes it as a Southwestern Territory, so we don't have that name Tennessee yet, so that's one big clue. What else?
I mean, if you had your prior knowledge also, they actually call it the state of Kentucky, is what the map is, and it's really specifically showing that kind of new area of Kentucky, so.
Okay, so we see the state of Kentucky, so we know kind of, Kentucky was a state before Tennessee was. That helps us to kind of place them in order. So thinking about these 5 maps as a whole, and we think about change over time, what are some conclusions that we can draw from these 5 maps about how Tennessee, how land and political boundaries developed during the period in which we're looking at these maps?
Indians don't matter.
Okay. The people that were here before don't matter, right? We're just moving them out.
Well, you do see in the first map, you see Indian tribes listed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like.
And over time.
But over time, yeah.
Yeah. So the first one they're noted, and the others we see really very little to no reference, right? Just trying to think if one of these, and it may be in really small detail, did note a couple of towns.
Like these are all real. I mean, this is talking about real estate. Wabash Company, right? Where is it? Army.
Yeah, it's on the fourth one. It says Crowtown down at the bottom.
Yeah, and there's a Cherokee town. So we do see on the one that is a map of the Tennessee government. In small detail, there is a couple notes of Crowtown and Cherokee Town. So we see some reference, but not a lot, right? Not a lot of notation of the peoples that were here before. What else?
We also know that it kind of spread west from the coast in. So we start with maps that are at the coast.
Okay.
And then as we go in, it goes further in west.
Okay. Right. So yeah, we see kind of essentially that westward movement from the time of the 13 colonies on, right?
I think somebody else said it, but you can really see how they explored, as they explored and gained more information, the map is more detailed and stuff.
You see the significance of waterways too, access to water.
Yes, so the importance of waterways.
Well, they were still looking for that Northwest Passage. They were still trying to see if they could get to the Pacific Ocean.
So trying to find that way to China, right? So thinking about this kind of activity, we're having students to look at a series of maps and to place them in sequential order. What are some skills that students would need to successfully be able to do this activity?
To do it quickly, prior knowledge.
All right, so you need prior knowledge, right? What else?
To understand how explorers go in and map an area, and then it's settled, and then you have government come in and fill in the details.
Yeah, so essentially how we go from exploration to kind of frontier to early development to cities and towns and countries, and so kind of the progress of civilization, right? Yeah. Okay.
So map, an understanding of how maps work, what they're telling you, the keys, the things like that. They would need to know that when it's bigger versus when it's smaller and more detailed, what the rivers are showing, what the more information you gain as you explore.
All right, so we'd have to understand the purposes of the map, of individual maps, and then kind of placing them together in context.
Just a side note, I was raised in Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, that's the West. But it's funny coming to Tennessee where in this, you certainly see it, this movement westward, and you see this exploration, this frontier, this western frontier, as you guys like to call it. And in Oklahoma, we'd be like, you guys are crazy, you guys are east. So it is funny to see how the influence of the movement westward influenced Tennessee with regards to Indian tribes and to just exploration.
Yeah.
Perspective-oriented type stuff.
I think our students are not going to have that Tennessee history knowledge that we really think that they missed out. And those of us who have been teaching for many years remember when we taught Tennessee history in 4th grade, that was the curriculum for 4th grade, and then they did it again in 7th, and so it's we missed that. So you can tell those of us sitting around the room that are kind of from Tennessee because we kind of know where the landmarks are and have that reference, that chain, and understand that we were once part of North Carolina, so we're finding that on the colonies and we see where we are. That's kind of I don't think that my students are going to have that. I'm going to have to teach that or at least give them a bigger reference to that before they can actually. This is going to be more of a challenge to them than
Right, so this one you need not just background knowledge when it comes to overall U.S. history, but you need some specific kind of Tennessee history background knowledge as well to kind of incorporate these maps together.
We don't teach that very much anymore, specifically. I teach 6th, but yeah, and the kids who come in my class, that was what we were just talking about, this would be a great beginning activity for 6th grade because they're coming out of 4th and 5th and they should have all that U.S. history for the last 2 years, but I still don't think my kids are going to have enough Tennessee history or that level of knowledge to be able to do it. But I want to do it. Oh, believe me, it's not going to stop me from doing the activity.
So you could think about ways to take this kind of idea for this activity and use it in a couple of different ways. Because you could switch out the maps, and you could really do this in a lot. So you could look at a series of maps from the exploration period and place them in order again for like 7th grade. So we could think about kind of early exploration and how that worked. If we think about, and really you could take any piece of your content, find maps, and have students place them in sequential order, because it really is about accessing background knowledge as well as understanding how to read and understand and analyze a map. So it really is just about finding the right set of maps. And so it's a great way to get at, summary and review, and to see kind of how they are actually taking the content that you've covered, how they are processing that, and then applying it to new sources. And then taking maybe content that you've done at different points in the year and blending that all together to make some sense of it. And so if we think about world history, where you guys are covering kind of different pieces at different times, and so it's not always in kind of chronological order, this would be a really good way to kind of help bring all of that together and help them to understand how things are happening either at the same time or right around the same time, and maybe kind of how they're influencing each other. I also have a different set of maps that I'm going to send you guys a link to. That's, again, it goes more with kind of the early U.S. history standards, but it's a series of maps that goes from kind of the founding of the nation up through like the Lewis and Clark expedition. And there's 6 maps there. So again, kind of a different set that you could use to kind of get at that early U.S. period. But I'll be happy to share those with you. So thoughts on any of these activities so far, as we get ready to start kind of shift to wrapping up here.
All these maps are on the Library of Congress
Yes,
website.
all of the maps that you guys have looked at with these are all Library of Congress maps. And like I said, when I send you the PowerPoint, you will have all of the links for these. So for example, the ones we just looked at here, I've got the links for all of those right here in the PowerPoint. All right, so a couple of other resources that I want to mention as we start to wrap up. We do have a number of other materials available from the Library of Congress, lesson plans, some activities, again, that get at using maps in different ways. And so there's links to here. This Tennessee's Western Frontier lesson plan that's for 4th and 8th grade actually uses the Kentucky and Tennessee map that's in that, and has students trace the ways that they would come into the state, and then explain kind of why they would come that way. So you're actually looking at the maps and thinking about the ways that people traveled into the state from North Carolina. So lots of different resources that are there that are available for you. So there's, again, the Library of Congress has a wonderful array of maps available through their collections that you can access online and use.